Ford is 82 years old and has nothing left to show or leave behind. Hidden Ford has finally named the 7 stars he wants to work with, never stand to work with. From huge personality clashes to big gaps in how they work, these are the names that he said it, tried his patience, pushed his limits, and made him the hell of the job. Who did Harrison Ford hate? Keep an eye out because you're about to learn about the 7 stars Harrison Ford really didn't like and the shocking stories behind each one that Hollywood tried not to say. Let's get started. Shia LaBeouf is number 1. The fight between Harrison Ford and Shia LaBeouf is one of the most honest and open ones in modern times. The place of battle, the story of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. 2007 was the year. Ford. He was 65 years old and already a living legend. He was going back to one of his most famous parts after almost 20 years. Shia LaBeouf, the wild child star of Transformers and even Stevens, was cast as his son, which was a decision that bosses were excited and some fans were confused. The attitude was off from the start. Vic Armstrong, who was in charge of the stunts, said that the conflict started right away. Every scene that Harrison does is like precise engineering, Armstrong said. Every time Shia saw someone, she treated it like a personal dig. Things were tense from the first practice. Ford, who is known for not wasting time, was allegedly annoyed by LaBeouf's improvisations and emotional outbursts, which messed up the carefully planned beats of his show. A father and son would talk to each other at one point. The next day, Ford would stop making cars and try to figure out what was going on in a scene that had gone wrong. Frank Marshall, the producer, said it straight out. There are two different. Harrison won't let the latter happen because he has a commitment to character and a dedication to chaos. It was the worst time for tension. During an important emotional scene between their characters' date, LaBeouf is said to have gone off script, which pushed the moment into the realm of theater. Ford, who is known for his quiet seriousness, shut it down. Slow down. Crew members said it was a great example of how to professionally hold back. Meeting young people's revolt. But the strain didn't come to a head in public until after the movie came out. In 2010, Shia LaBeouf wrote a wave of harsh honesty and putting herself down. Attacked the movie in interviews and in public. It's time to monkey, swing, and other things like that. The writer and Steven Spielberg are both to blame. LaBeouf called out, but the job of an actress is to bring the story to life and make it work. I wasn't able to do that, so I quit. That's my fault. Simple. That wasn't the end of it. If you don't acknowledge, LaBeouf added. He even got Ford involved. Then why do they trust you the next time you're promoting a movie? He didn't like it either, even though he said, we had major discussions. The movie this could have been changed. There was a reason why not everyone agreed with it. It might have been brave and honest, but Ford wasn't pleased. When they talked to facts, the usually quiet Ford finally answered with a jab that cut very thin. Ford said in a deadpan voice, I think I told him he was a scroop, as I think it's my duty as an actor to support the movie without making a huge deal out of it. Still, Ford couldn't help but add a bit of class to the jab. Shia is driven, careful, and skilled, and he is learning how to handle a very special case. Not easy. I think I told him that statement is important. It wasn't a real disavowal. It was Harrison Ford being Harrison Ford. Rough, direct, but with just the right amount of sass. Uncertainty to make people think. Was he angry, upset, or protective of the business? It could be any of those things. LaBeouf never hit back. Right? Away, but things went badly between him and Spielberg. His picture in public turned into erratic shows, rehab, arrests, and stories for the tabloids. Years later, he would say that he felt bad about destroying relationships early in his career, but he never said which ones. I'm sorry to Ford. So where are they now? It's officially quiet. There has been no public making up, no reunion, tour, and no buddy moment on the red carpet. The time when Indiana Jones and the LaBeouf's absence wasn't addressed when Destiny was made public. It was just as expected. Ford moved on. The show went on, and Shia did too, for better or worse. Even worse. But keep this in mind if you want to know if Harrison Ford is still mad. He said about LaBooze, "I think it's to bite the hand that feeds you." It's BS, he says. Not many words. That says a lot. Number 2. Tommy Lee Jones. Some people in Hollywood clashes are public, loud, and dangerous. Some people are simmering, below the surface, never going off, but always felt the fight on the set of The Fugitive between Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones was the second. On screen, they had a great connection. It was so important that it helped launch the 1993 movie to almost $370 million around the world. Off-screen, though, it was a whole different story. It all started with a simple doubt. Andrew Davis, who is in charge of Fugitives, says that Harrison Ford wasn't ready to sign because he heard Jones was here. It is. Harrison may have thought that Tommy was a strong performer. Davis told Yahoo, "I don't want to be in his shadow. Fun and games." And they had good reason to be afraid. Tom Lee Jones was a natural force, improvised, unplanned, and unexpected. Tommy attacked every scene with a jazz mind, taking a chance. Davis remembered that with each take, the beats and stresses were different. Harrison needed steady beats to build the arc of his character. Both of them were very smart, but making different movies. That difference set the tone from the very first day on set. Everything Ford, who was the best artist ever, went into scenes like machines with precise engineering. Every beat was estimated, and every feeling was logged. Jones, on the other hand, blew right through that structure like a storm. The most famous fight happened during the encounter in the tunnel, which is one of the most famous scenes in the movie. Jones's jerky energy, his line changes, and his off-kilter reactions, none of it was in sync. Using Ford's method, he went over the edge because of it. Things got tense. Jones started changing how he said things in the middle of a scene, which was confusing Ford's timing and pace of feeling. After that, there were heated arguments, but no shouting matches. It wasn't a tabloid. Conversation starters, but phrases that set off tense talks about professional politeness and shared responsibility in acting speak. That always means one thing: you're doing my work. Ford, as a worker, you never did what the tabloids asked. He didn't go public. He didn't say bad things about Jones in public. But it was clear that it was cold. The crew on the set saw it. There was, said an unnamed source, respect each other, but it was cold, like two dogs circling each other without looking at each other. Jones, on the other hand, never said anything directly about the strain. But that's just Tommy. He is known for not liking the media and having even less time for Hollywood flattery. As someone once told him, Tommy Lee Jones doesn't do diplomacy, he does dominance. And maybe that's what made him so dangerous. What a great job the runaway did. Ford's controlled desperation in the face of Jones's relentless, sarcastic chase. It was can catch fire. That was clear during award season. Jones won the Academy Award as the Best Supporting Character. Ford got no answer. Andrew Davis, the director, don't mince things. Harrison and I were disappointed that we weren't recognized. Brady did a great job, but Tommy got all the praise. Good job, I think it's his best part. For his part, Ford didn't say anything, but insiders say that he was very angry behind the scenes. And not because the Oscars didn't pick him, but because of how easily the story went from his movie to Jones's big break. When Jones's 1998 spin-off U.S. Marshals ended, the hurt didn't go away. Start making things. There was no sign of Harrison Ford. He never came back, never talked about the movie or the character, and never went back in that world. That says a lot for a brand man like Ford. Third, Shia Young. If you watched Blade Runner and had a weird, almost in the movie's romantic scenes, there was a lot of awkward tension between Rick Deckard and Rachel. Picture it. What was happening? On the screen was a reflection of what was going on behind the scenes. A deeply relationships between Harrison Ford and Shaw Young that turned a sci-fi love story into a real one. One of Hollywood's most mentally difficult fights. For Ford, a man who he built characters based on restraint and skill for a long time. Working with Shaw Young in 1982 was like walking into an emotional trap. He hadn't planned to go through, for he saw her as distracting because she was intense, determined, and drew him in. Director Ridley Scott of Blade Runner says the problem started almost right away. Sean always acted like the character. Scott thought back, which meant he was never sure if he was talking to the woman or the copy. Sorry, that wasn't a praise. Ford, who thought Young's insistence on keeping her personal space separate from her work area, threw him off. Who they are on and off TV, it made the lines less clear, which made him already grumpy and worn out from shooting 50 nights in a row in the rain. Clearly not comfy. The stress grew as the shoot went on. Stress erupted during shooting of what was supposed to be Deckard and Rachel's most important love scene. What was, as cinematographer Jordan Cronenweth put it, what was written as a personal and transformational moment turn. Talked about each other in public or been on the same stage. Not there is even a picture of the two of them together on the red carpet. One director for a long time, they never hated each other, but they sure didn't belong in the same group, said someone who saw the fight. Frame, the tension between them wasn't personal. It was fundamental. Body-based gravity. Roberts sailed. The one looked inside and the other reached out. It was an example of movie DNA that wouldn't splice. So, was there a fight? Not in the usual sense, but in a field that is concerned with what might have been. This was a pair that Hollywood liked, learned to give up. For some reason, the camera picks up more than the players want. It finds the truth. And the truth was easy. It was never meant for Harrison Ford and Julia Roberts to fall in love, not even in movies. Fifth place goes to Kevin Costner. It's a close working together between Harrison Ford and Kevin Costner was the second one. A war of egos in art that has been building up slowly, philosophical ideas that were never shown on screen but left a scar that can't be hidden. It was meant to be a moment that changed both of their careers. A huge, high-budget Western epic, a history of grandeur, and two American icons leading the way. Ford, the veteran with a past of being quiet and intense. Costner, who calls himself he is a cowboy philosopher who loves Oscar gold and big epic stories. But before the cameras even took a picture, the dream project fell apart because of two men who just couldn't share. The saddle. Being in charge of creativity has always been the battleground. Ford, ever the artist, was eager to learn more. He thought of a character study with a slow burn that looked at the mental effects of violence on the border. I was interested in how they felt. Damage Ford is said to have asked the producers, what happens to a guy when he has to kill over and over to stay alive? Costner wanted something else. In full, it wasn't quiet pain that he saw in the West. It was movie-like suffering. Grandeur. It was possible to tell a story as big as the land, he is said to have said in early meeting times. Big clouds and a lot at stake. That's what people in the West want. It wasn't just creative tension. It was existential anxiety as well. There were more than just differences about the script. They had different ideas about the world. Lawrence Kasdan, a producer who had worked with both guys before, told it like it was. Harrison wanted to look into how violence on the border affected people's minds. Kevin aimed to record the grandiose myth of American growth. They were reading the same book, while making very different movies. Script? The problem got worse as pre-production went on. Both players started sending in changes to the script that weren't meant to make the story better, but to carefully make the other person less important. One draft focused a lot on Costner's journey to become a hero. Other little was his scenes, and gave Ford long speeches. The script turned into what William Goldman named this a creative death spiral. And each change it made it harder to work together. They finally broke during what insiders still call one of the nicest but roughest fights in Hollywood history. Ford, angry, is said to have turned to, "Do you even care about what this character is carrying? What he's lost?" Costner asked without flinching. Replied, "You're trying to turn an epic into a therapy session." That was the end of it. The deal didn't fall apart with a public meltdown. There was no yelling or storming out. There was only quiet. No changes made. Mike Oites, an agent who worked with both stars at the time. Later, they said it was two valid artistic ideas destroying each other through pure conflict and stubbornness on both sides. No one from Ford or Costner never talked about the fight directly in interviews, but both of them did things that more than words could say. Ford never agreed to work on another Western project that even remotely resembled the work that was put away. On the other hand, Costner pushed forward and finally let open Range. And then Yellowstone, his own big stories that he wrote himself and was in charge of. People who work in the industry think Ford was slightly insulted by the way Costner told the story. It's too smooth, too much mythology, and not enough soul. A person who knows Ford well said that he respected Costner as a movie director. He didn't trust him to be in a scene with him. Costner, meanwhile, it was said that they thought Ford cared too much about character development. As one team member put it, Kevin Harrison made everything too about himself. He wished the story could live. Harrison, I wanted it to stew. They haven't talked about the failed project in public for decades. They've never worked. Since then, they have never been on the same panel, shared a reunion, or even performed on the same event stage. Brad Pitt is number 6. Harrison Ford doesn't just see movies as a way to make money. It's a plan for character, depth, and power. He was born in a time when artists did more than just play their parts. They formed it, fought to keep it true, and guarded it like a holy text. So when Brad Pitt was young, at the height of his matinee hero fame, walked onto the set of The Devil's Own as both the star and it wasn't a clash of personalities, said the project's creator. It was a when different ideas clash. From the beginning, there wasn't a lot of conflict that would make the news. There was no yelling, there were no throne chairs or matches, but people who were there said the air was its thick with artistic conflict. Someone who was there said it was like seeing two men try to steer the same ship in different ways, each thinking they are keeping it from sinking. Brad Pitt had spent years playing an IRA killer with a lot of problems. Working on the writing, he had a vision that was full of depth, pain, and some colors of moral doubt. When Harrison Ford was cast as an NYPD sergeant, the project was important to Tom O'Mara, but he needed more for himself. In an interview with Esquire years later, Ford talked about his brave character. I also wanted something on my side, so it wasn't just a fight between good and evil. Something came in the form of Ford came up with the story himself. A scene where his character sees another cop shoot someone in a way that is morally questionable. Ford thought this would give his part more weight and humanity. One thing was wrong, though. Brad didn't agree. Worked with an author, Ford told me. Then we started filming, but Brad and I still didn't agree on the story. We all had different thoughts on it. That is, 2 stars, 2 images, and there is a ticking clock and no uniform script. The stress wasn't about fame. It was to do with power. Ford said, I can see why he wanted to stick to his point of view. If I wanted to do the same, with my point of view, or I was forcing my point of view on them. And it's true. That's how Brad felt. Brad never yelled in public. He kept things professional and kept a low profile before, during, and after the movie's release. But behind the scenes, say he was caught off guard by Ford's recent moves. Pitt had put up a good fight to bring The Devil's Own to life, and now he saw that his co-star was changing the tone in the middle of the movie, making things. One member of the crew remembers a quiet but important event. Brad would go keep quiet while Harrison talks to the director. This was clear in his eyes. He didn't think anyone was listening to him. Still, neither man down to Hollywood rumors or sabotage from the start. Instead, their fight got worse. Below the surface showed up as creative pushback instead of open hostility. As time went on, Ford seemed to think about the war with regret or even admiration. "First of all, I admire Brad," he said. "I'm a big fan of his acting. He's a great person, but it was fans who want a bad boy fight won't find it here. Instead, they'll find something more complicated, something that might be more interesting. Two players, one from the old school trying to make the same movie one, with grit, and the other with a modern sense of energy while going their own separate ways." So, did the feud end? In public? Yes. There isn't any bad blood today. There aren't any snarky interviews or private insults. Everyone knew, but didn't say it, how hard that movie really was. Harrison Ford in the end. "I said that The Devils Own is a movie I really, really like." K, for his part, never hit back with hard words. In fact, both men were nice to each other. Let time do what it does best, which is smooth out the rough spots. 7th, Mel Gibson. Ford and Gibson seemed to have a lot in common at first glance. Both were huge hits at the box office and had fans all over the world. They were powerful, on and off screen, but they were very different people. Harrison Ford had based his success on quiet professionalism, moral consistency, and a sense of moral weight that acted like the roles he played, like Han Solo, Indiana Jones, or Jack. Ryan Ford stood for something on and off screen. Mel Gibson, on the other hand, had become a lightning rod for debate, even though he was smart, brave, and deadly. With the Passion of the Christ under his belt, Gibson's behavior away from the camera started to take precedence over what he did on it. Ford noticed how smart he was. Things got really tense during early pre-production talks for a thriller with a lot at stake in the early 2000s. The project, which was never named, they were supposed to work together for the first time in public, but behind the scenes, tensions were rising. Gibson's string of scandals, included from anti-Semitic comments to violent actions, led to what sources called a poisonous undercurrent was present. Ford, who usually kept his personal,